This is Will Faerber from Art to Ride, and today we're looking at a submission by Victoria with her horse Dylan. She's just beginning this horse's work in the Shambone. He's an older thoroughbred who evidently spent some years as a school horse as well as running on the racetrack, where it doesn't sound like he had too stellar a career and then was retired and became a school horse for a few years. And now Victoria has him and she wants to get him working over his back. She's just started him working in the Shambone. This is the first day. And we'll take a look at that. And so far it looks like she has it adjusted pretty well. That is, it's not too tight. It's not forcing his head down. This horse is a great example to be able to watch a horse transform, because from these earliest bits of lunging here that we're going to see to the later part, you'll see quite a transformation in this horse. As we see in the beginning here, the horse is going rather tense. Its head is up in the air. You can see that its back is dropped. Its hind legs, as you can clearly see, are moving behind the horse. That is, the horse is still pushing off the ground when the hind leg comes behind the body. So that puts a lot of stress on the hocks, as often how horses wear out their hocks, because they're taking the pressure in the wrong angle. If the horse pushes when the hind leg goes out behind the body, it really puts a lot of stress on those hocks. So if the horse is working through its back, the hind leg should be coming forward before it goes out behind the horse, as you see in this, where the hind legs just seem to be sort of trailing along behind it. And you can see that there's not much unison between the front and back end. But we're going to see this horse clearly transformed over the course of this exercise here over a few days. Now, it works the horse for about 2 weeks here, so I'm not sure exactly what the time frame is here. But we're going to see a good transformation of this horse. Even here, he's a little bit more active. Still, his head is quite up in the air. But that's par for the course. As the horse learns to take contact and stretch into the bridle, it takes a little bit of time. But this is a little more active in this direction, and he's already starting to step underneath his body, and we see a little more flexion in the hock beginning to happen there. And this is a good size that you have this horse on, good size of the circle. That is, you don't have him too small, and he seems to be doing this quite willingly. That is, moving around you on a large circle without a lot of resistance, and that's good. That will lead to what we want. As we can say here, he's still rather tense, and you can see him just sort of finding his way with the Shambone. He feels the pressure up there. So now we're going to come back to after she's been doing this for 2 weeks, and we're going to see a very difference in the walk here. When she comes back to the walk, already the walk is more swinging. We see him stretching down, or the neck has lost that tension where he just looked like he was stuck up in the air. That is, with his head and neck, and was quite ewe-necked, and now we see that underside of the neck is already starting to relax. And look how different the walk is. You know, it has some rhythm here. When we saw the walk earlier, it was a very stifled looking walk. She's doing a little canter here, which is perfectly fine. And one of Victoria's questions is whether or not it's okay to canter on the lunge line with a Shambone, and it certainly is, but I would not do much of it until the horse is clearly stretching in the trot. So I wouldn't do much canter work. But now this horse is really starting to stretch, and we can see in 2 weeks' time how different this horse is moving, how much freer it's moving. And you can see with this horse, if you look at his back, actually it already looks amazingly better here in just 2 weeks' time. But if you look right behind the saddle pad there, as he comes around, you'll see that there's a bit of a dip there, and you can see how high those hip bones are. And that's from having never been worked correctly in his life. But all that will disappear in time, and the back will fill in beautifully, and the horse will get the time that it needs. Remember that when a horse develops correctly, it takes a year or two of that stretching forward to actually pull the back up, and it actually pulls the withers up through the shoulders, and the back flattens out and then rounds towards the back, towards the horse's hips. Should look like a nice big round, completely round muscle, so to speak, instead of what we see here, which is we see the back, we see how high that croup is, and but now we see already, look how much more flexion just in this 2 weeks' time. The hind leg is now moving under it. It looked very clearly when we first saw this horse that he was moving, just pulling himself along with his front ends, and his back end was very far out behind. But the difference in what we see now is pretty amazing transformation. Now the horse is really starting to swing. We see much more, like to say, like a bicycle. When you see the hocks, it looks like a man pedaling a bicycle, so to speak, and staying underneath itself. And once again, as we see as he goes around there, that the hind leg is not so far out behind the back, see what I'm talking about, and it's already coming forward at a point where before it was still pushing with the leg way behind the body. Once again, that does a lot of damage to the hocks, and why we see so many horses having to be injected at such an early age these days, because if they're not working through their back, remember that basically they're wearing out everything else. It's like a car. If you take the suspension off and drive it, for a year, a brand new car will fall apart. Well, the same thing is true of a horse. Without its suspension, which is the top line that allows the front and back end to be conjoined, so to speak, that's what takes the pressure, puts the shock absorber system on the horse and takes the pressure out of the hard tissue of the joints. And so once again, we see him carrying that, trying to start him off in a canter, and you can see him throw his head there. And once again, I'd say it's a little premature to be doing much cantering with this horse yet. So try a little bit from time to time. Just don't press on it, and certainly don't canter for very long periods. But now we see him really starting to stretch forward and swing into the trot. This is a huge improvement over what we saw in the beginning, and will lead to this horse. This looks like quite a nice horse, and could really be a nice mover once he develops correctly. And people get confused about. They often say, "Oh, well, the horse is stretching down. It looks like it's on the forehand. Isn't it on the forehand?" Well, yes, it is on the forehand, as all young horses and beginning horses are. When I say young, I mean inexperienced horses that haven't been developed correctly. But it takes time. But with the horse's head and neck stretched out and the horse moving underneath its body, it's actually much less on the forehand than a horse whose head is being pulled up and his back is hollow. If a horse's back is hollow, it doesn't matter how high they bring the legs. The horse is still on the forehand. Thus the confusion, when people look at things like saddlebreds, and sadly we've seen dressage head more and more in the direction of this kind of, these kind of artificial gaits that we see in saddlebreds, where we're going more and more for this exaggerated knee action, which really has nothing to do with dressage at all. In fact, that's the antithesis of dressage. So don't confuse with high leg action with whether a horse is on the forehand or not, because the horse is hollow in the back, it is on the forehand. No matter how high it pulls its legs up in the air, when it puts them back down, it's still on the forehand. And once again, you've taken that important shock absorber system off of the horse. Thus, the reason that so many of these horses, these gaited horses and badly trained dressage horses, are going lame at such a young age, as simply their shock absorber systems are worn out. So with this horse now, we see a clear change in his trot. So much more swinging over his back. I mean, look how much more relaxed the horse look. I mean, if you actually showed this, side by side, a picture of what you see here with what we saw in the beginning of this work, we would clearly see it would look like two different horses, which is basically it does. So this is absolutely beautiful what you're doing here. I love how you're keeping this horse on this big circle while you're doing this. You're never letting getting the horse out of control. Some people, and I've had even veterinarians, tell people that lunging is bad for horses. Well, lunging is bad for horses if it's done incorrectly, just like riding is bad for horses if it's done incorrectly. A lot of people use lunging just simply to chase a horse and wear it out. And if that's all you're doing, the time it takes you to do it will get longer and longer. So here you are, doing something in a completely incorrect manner that's going to take longer and longer, because all you're really doing is wearing the horse out, which means every day what you're doing is getting it aerobically fitter and fitter without any training involved. That's why we see, if you go down on the Florida circuit, when you see where they can't get away with the druggings that they used to do, and I'm not sure which was better for the horses, but we see them out lunging at 5 o'clock in the morning for hours and hours, lunging these horses to wear them down, to get them quiet enough to go in the ring. Well, we can see what a complete waste of time, that would be. As let's go out and drive your car, 500 miles to warm it up to go on your daily ride to town. Well, your car would certainly wear out a lot quicker. Well, the horse is certainly the same way. But working over the back like this, you will preserve the strength of the horse and get it working correctly. Lunging will not hurt the horse if it's done correctly in this way. So that was really good and an excellent example of how far a horse can be transformed in a very short period of time. Did a wonderful job on the lunging. And now we're going to take a look at some riding work here. The walk, I'd like to see right off the bat a little more swinging. And remember that, the biggest goal here is that in all gaits to get the horse rhythmic and active once again and swinging over its back. So the biggest thing I'd like to see here is just a more active walk. I mean, this isn't terrible, but he could be stretching down into it and just swinging with quite a bit more activity than he's doing here. The walk looks a little stilted, as I like to say. It looks a bit like his hind legs here are being pulled out of the mud, so to speak, like a horse walking in deep footing, and kind of slugging its legs up out of the ground. Now, if you find that the horse can't do that, my basic goal of training is always when I put a horse, under saddle, I should be able to stretch it in the walk. If I can't, then I know its back is simply not strong enough to carry weight, and I'm going to have to wait a while longer before I start riding that horse. But this horse looks like, it's not bad. I could certainly be swinging and stretching a lot more and a lot more active, so I certainly would like to see that. I'm not saying that the horse is too weak to be ridden. It looks like he's in pretty good shape there for that. Just try to make it a little more active as you go, and even as I'm seeing you go here, it's already starting to look quite a bit better here. Just keep trying to keep the walk a little more active. Looks like she's trying to do a little shoulder in here, which is not bad. A little too much bend in the neck there for me. Remember, we never want to see more bend in the neck than we see in the middle of the back. When we talk about bend, that's really where it comes from, is the middle of the back, not whether the horse can pull its neck from one side or other. And whenever you see trainers, you'll see trainers sometimes bending necks from side to side that they say is suppling the horse. Well, what that really does is just slow the horse down. It doesn't do anything more than that. Every time you bend the neck out of line with the rest of the spine, it disconnects with the spine anyway, so there isn't really anything that it's really doing. So once again, when we talk about bend, it's bend in the middle of the horse's back that is the entire length of the horse's top line, not just bending the neck into one side. So once again, with that walk, I would have liked to have seen that quite a bit more active in the walk and quite a bit more swinging. Same thing I see here once we start off in the trot. It's a little slow, and I'd like to see you ask him to be just a little more active and swing a little more actively over his back. The trot we're seeing here looks more like the trot that we first saw on the lunge line. That is, it's a little too far out behind, that he's not really tracking underneath the body enough. It's very slow. There isn't really enough flexion in the hocks. So what this might tell me is one of two things. Either, this horse simply hasn't developed enough to do this under saddle yet, or the rider simply isn't asking him, for the horse to be active and swinging and isn't quite getting the horse stretched enough. So the first thing I would say with this horse is just to try to send him on a little more actively and see if that helps. But you can see as the horse came around there, that the horse's belly is still quite distended. That is, his flanks, it looks quite bulbous there at the horse's flanks. That is behind your leg there. We should see the horse pulling up through its abdominal muscles a little more than we see here, in order to carry the weight properly and get up through its back. So once again, this is not terrible, but it's also, it needs to be a lot more active than what we're seeing here, and a lot more stretched into the contact for this to be a happy situation. This is looking a little better as she's going here. But as I said, I'd still like to see a little more swing in this. I might just suggest doing, compare what you see here with what you compare that with what we see in the better part of the lunging video, because we want to get this trot to look the same. So if you see mounted here that he's just really not quite getting underneath himself, he's not really quite stretching and not getting that bicycling action that we talked about before in the hind legs, where you can clearly see the hocks making a circle. And here, once again, the hind leg looks like it's out behind his back. So this could be a strength issue. Try sending the horse on a little bit and see if that helps. But if it doesn't, and you really just can't get the horse there, I would just suggest spending more time on the lunge line until we get to the point where the horse is strong enough to carry you in the same way. So film yourself and compare the trot that you're getting here ridden with the trot that you're getting when he was really good on the lunge line, and I would suggest that you try to get the two of them to meet somewhere. It is perfectly fine to ride in the shambone, as long as it's correctly adjusted. That is, it's not too tight. It's not going to hurt the horse. I would do that only, where you're in a ring where you have good footing. As if you're going to work a horse seriously, it needs to be on good footing, where the horse is sure of itself. People ask me, well, can I wear this going out cross country? And actually, certainly in France, I saw a lot of people do that. But I would be hesitant to do that. Only because, when you get outside, there's a lot of things that can affect the horse's balance in terms of the footing. And, a horse must always be as free as possible in the head and neck. I mean, that's why they outlawed, for instance, standing martingales in international competition, because the horse can't get its head up. It can't right itself. And the worst accidents that you'll ever see is when a horse, starts to fall and it is going fast, and if it can't pull its head up, it will flip over on top of the rider. So that's really why you wouldn't want to wear the shambone out cross country and that sort of thing, or, even galloping and this sort of thing in very fast speeds. So you'd want to keep it to a balanced trot and a reasonable working trot. if you were riding out. But once again, only on good footing. So you certainly can try the Shambone under saddle. I might suggest it. But once again, I want to suggest that you compare what you're getting on the lunge line with what you're getting when you're riding, because we need the two of those to be, to come together somewhere. Now the walk here is starting to stretch a little bit. I'm liking that better, so it's certainly looking better here as he's going. But we want to get him swinging a lot more actively. It's still just not quite enough. And that, once again, as I said, this very well from what you've told me about this horse, a strength issue. Remember that it takes 1 year with a horse that isn't damaged, to establish the top line, 2 years to confirm it to the point that the horse can begin to develop collection. So, with a horse that you're having to go a little slower with, like you say, this horse has had some chiropractic issues that have needed to be adjusted, but this walk is looking much better there. But once again, see how distended the horse's belly is. So as he begins to work through the back, he also works through the abdominal muscles. Once again, correct training is very much like Pilates for people. It's not just lifting the back, it's pulling the abdominal muscles in. It's your core strength, and that's the same thing is true of the horse. So as you see him develop, you will see that sort of pregnant mare look, so to speak, in the flanks there, where they're kind of distended and coming out the sides there. You'll see that disappear, and you'll see a line form along the edge of the horse's rib cage, where you, just like a person that you see fit, you see six-pack abs. Well, that's what you want to see on the horse as well. And you see that outline of the rib cage, just about at the level of the bottom of your foot there, and that will tell you the horse is beginning to pull up through the back more and pulling its abdominal muscles up as well, which is what we want once again. So once again, to recap here, what I see, the walk is improving here, and actually even the trot is improving here a little bit as you're going. I would still just try sending the horse on a little bit more than you're doing here, and see if you can get it to swing just a little more. This looks better though this time around than it has up till now, starting to swing a little better. Still could use to stretch much deeper in the trot while you're riding and just be a little more active. So see if you can't do that. I like how you're staying to the rising trot. Now this is looking much better here as you come around there. That's much improved. And once again, just looking at the muscles, look how the top of the neck is starting. You see that sort of thicken. You see that U-necked look, that U-necked tense look underneath the bottom of the horse's neck is starting to go away. So this trot is improving as you're going. Everything you're doing here that I've seen on this video is in the right direction. There's been nothing that has been too bad. I love how you're sticking to the rising trot, which of course you should. There shouldn't be any sitting trot on a horse until its back is quite well developed, and whether it can support you in the sitting trot. And I can tell from looking at this horse, there's no way he would be able to do that. So you're doing the right thing by staying in a rising trot. You don't want to do a lot of canter. Yet, you can start introducing the canter a little bit, as you did on the lunge line there a little bit, but you don't want to do much of it. What you'll find is that when you improve the trot, the canter will improve all by itself and develop the strength. So you need to develop the strength in the trot in order to get the horse to canter correctly. But once again, this is looking much, much better. Just needs to be a little more active, so I'm not sure, were I there teaching you right now, I'd say just try to go a little faster and make the horse a little more active, and see if that gets him to swing forward into the contact a little more and stretch a little deeper into the contact. But this is really coming very, very nicely. I really have no problem with this. You've done a very, very good job, and you are certainly on track to getting the right job done. The main thing I just want you to say is just really compare your trots when it's good on the lunge line with what you're getting under saddle. And we need to make what you look under saddle look like what you're getting on the lunge line. And that will happen here very shortly, the way this is coming together for you. It's really, really well done. You see, if you just take a little patience and take time with these horses, how beautifully they can become, even if they've had years of incorrect riding, as it sounds like this one has. It doesn't matter how old a horse is when you start it. If it's sound, it takes the same amount of time as to develop a young horse. It just is nicer when we do it when they're young, because we don't have to go through all those periods, and it's not so difficult, and we don't run the chance of the damage. So the younger you start, the better. But these older horses like this one, can completely transform his frame and look like a very different horse, after a year of doing this. Actually, he already looks very different from the beginning. The first bit of lunging that I saw when he was very, very hollow. This horse has already transformed in the short time that you've been working him. So really good. I like how his walk is starting to stretch down there. So getting back to your questions once again, so yes, you can ride. Let me reiterate that in the Shambone. Stick mostly to the trot. I certainly wouldn't try the canter in it until he's cantering on the lunge line, which I wouldn't even bother to try the canter anyway until the horse is cantering well on the lunge line. To say once in a while we see horses that can canter better than they can trot, and it's useful to canter them. But if a horse is really hollow, the way we saw this one trying to canter, it wouldn't do him any good at all, because we don't want to spend a lot of time with the horse doing anything wrong. Once again, your shoulder in here, just a little bit too much bend in the neck. Don't pull your outside hand away from the neck as you were doing there, but keep the horse straighter in the neck. So have less angle and less bend in the neck. So once again, remembering that we always want to have the same amount of bend in the neck as in the middle of the back, which is what always guides everything. Been wonderful seeing you today. Great job on your own. You know, it really does me great to see how you people can do this on your own at home and bring these horses along. Once again, this has been Will Faerber from Art to Ride with our new friend here from Canada. Look forward to seeing you again. Very, very well done on this. Keep it up. Just a little more active in your trot work, and try to make your trot on the saddle look like the trot on the lunge line. Thank you so much.